Welcome back. In this module, we're going to get some practice with our CTE and SubQuery, and we're going to learn a little bit more about filters. Taking a look at our outline, this is a two-part module. So part one, we're going to build on all the things we learned in our previous module and get some practice doing CTEs and subqueries. After that, we're going to take a quick diversion looking at filters using the and, with, ors, and kind of go into a little bit more detail there. And that should take about 10 minutes. So with that, let's get started into our CTE and subquery Get Your Reps In. Okay, how are you feeling? I hope that wasn't too hard. I know it was a lot of parts. If you were a little tricked up, that's okay. No worries. We'll go through it together. And like I said, if you need to, do it again. Try it with a different problem. All of this stuff, like when you're learning, is practice. As you practice more, it's going to become more familiar. If you're only doing the examples that we're doing and you're struggling a little bit, that probably means that you need a little bit of extra help, and that's okay. It took me a long time to learn all of this stuff. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is this part one, this doozy. Okay, so we want to create a query. So we're going to do select from our table. And we want to pull in vendor ID. We want the date of the trip. We've done this enough times, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit and do date of drop-off date time as. So I don't like calling my thing date because then it's highlighted as a keyword. So I'm just going to call it dates, plural, so it stays nice and black. Okay. Now we want to create a category called tip type. When we want to create a category, this is going to be our conditional logic. We're thinking about our case statement. So we're going to say case. When tip amount is less than 5, then small. When tip amount between 5 and 20, then medium. When tip amount greater than 20, then large. Else missing tip amount. Now we need to end as tip type. Okay, a couple of points here. If you didn't put this else as the missing tip amount, don't worry about it. Not a big deal. If you didn't do between 5 and 20, let's just say you did this. When tip amount greater or equal to 5 and tip amount less than or equal to 20, if you did this, this is the same thing as between. Same thing. And it really doesn't matter which to use. I think the between is a little cleaner and it's a little bit less typing. That's the only benefit. Okay. So we're not going to worry about that. Put this back. Okay, so now we have our case statement. So we did 1, 2, and 3. And for the filters, we're going to filter for the month of, only February. And vendor ID equals 2. Okay, so to add in that filter, where extract month from drop off date time equals 2. So filters for month of February and vendor ID equals 2. Filtering for vendor ID 2. And then we're going to put a note in here for this case statement, creating buckets of tip amounts. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. Oh, and we also wanted, nope, that was it. Okay. Now, I always like to run my query piece by piece by piece. Because I got the green check mark and it said that it worked. I'd be like, oh, okay, but I always use my eyeballs and make sure that it looks good. Okay, so let's see. We have a small, we have a medium. I don't know by doing this if my categories worked. So instead of just trusting BigQuery, I'm going to be dubious. I'm going to take tip amount and I'm going to do it again. Basically what I want to do is I want to just look and see and make sure that my categories are working correctly. So I have small, medium, small, small, medium. Let's see if there's a large that I can find quickly. These are all, whoa, lots of smalls. I guess that makes sense. 20 is kind of a lot for a taxi cab, especially 10 years ago. Okay, but I can see that my smalls and my mediums are definitely working, and I'm assuming that my large is working as well. And if I wanted to be really, really meticulous about it, I could do just the tip amount and then the tip type and do a select distinct and make sure. But for brevity, we won't do that. All right, so now I have this piece. I have my inside query. I'm going to tab them inside. I'm going to highlight, tab. Now I'm going to type with tip buckets as, and you can name this whatever you want. I'm calling it tip buckets because that's what we made. And I feel like that's really descriptive. Okay, so we have our tip buckets. We're going to collapse it. This is what our output's going to look like, vendor ID, dates, and then the tip type. Let me actually get rid of, hang on. Let me get rid of this tip amount. Okay. And what I want to do is for vendor ID 2, by each day, I want to count how many times there was a small tip versus a medium tip versus a large tip. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit select vendor ID, date, dates. Okay, don't do that to me. Tip type. Is it tip types or tip type? Sounds like I'm just saying the same thing, tip type. Okay, tip type. And then I'm going to count tip type from tip buckets. Group by 1, 2, 3. And this is super messy, and I forgot to label it as total tips. And I said to order it by vendor ID, date of trip, and I should also put tip type. That way it looks really nice. So we're going to do order by 1, 2, 3. Okay, so what does this mean? For February 1st in 2014 for vendor ID, for large tips, there were 142 cases. For medium, there were 10,000. And for small, there were 261,000. Then it goes to the next day, February 2nd. We see we have 137, 11,000, 22. And as I'm scrolling, it looks like this pattern is pretty much the same, where you get a lot of small tips, a handful of medium tips, and almost no large tips. Those are very, very rare. So I would say we did a pretty good job with our categories in that case. Maybe we would want to make large between 15, if it's greater than 15, to make the buckets a little more even, but it was just an example. Okay. So now we've done part 1 and 2. So now we're going to do this same thing, but we're going to use a subquery. So we're going to open up a new tab, and we're going to split to the right. And now with my tip buckets, well, actually, let me do this. I'm going to do select star from, and then I have my parentheses. So now I have my shell ready, and I'm just going to copy Mr. Tip Buckets, and I'm going to boop, there he is. And then I'm going to collapse. If you're collapsing like I just did here and it doesn't go all the way, that's because your keywords did not line up like they need to. So sometimes you have to do a little extra formatting. Okay. So let's start with our select star. And what we're doing here is we're just seeing, okay, I did the subquery, what am I getting? And I see, okay, I have a lot of rows and I have the vendor, the dates, and the tip type. Great. So now I'm going to do a little copy here. So instead of select star, we're going to do this. I just copied from before, vendor ID, dates, tip type, and the count of tip types. And then I'm going to group by 1, 2, 3. Order by 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I see that I have 2014, February 1st. I have 84 rows here. I have 84 rows in my CTE version. You might say, there's only 28 days in February. How did I get to 84? Because I had 28 days times 3 buckets. Okay, and let's see if our totals matched. And they did. Perfect. 142, 142, 10, 953, 10, 953. And we don't have to look at every single one to make sure that it lines up. The fact that these numbers matched up perfectly, for that to just happen randomly would be really, really rare. So it's really not worth the squeeze to validate any further than that. Okay, so that's it. We're done. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint and wrap up this module. So what did we do today? We practiced our conditional logic, our case statement. We also practiced our group by, and we applied some filters. And as you notice, every time I'm trying to make sure that we're using all the same techniques, that way we don't forget. We also used that query that we used our conditional logic and group by to create a CTE and a subquery. And then we validated our results by comparing the two. In the next module, we are going to use multiple CTEs and multiple subqueries. And that's when things really get spicy. See you then. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would be so appreciative if you could like the video and subscribe to help me create more content for you. Thank you.